Well, thank you for having me and asking me to do this. It's quite an honor for me to come here today and tell my story and tell our stories as a Road Lounge Métis. I'm a Road Lounge Métis, and I was born in Saskatoon here and lived on a Road Lounge where Bowman Collegiate is. Our families, there was over 35 family members that lived there. And I lived there till 1953 when they moved us off our Road Lounge and we moved into the city of Saskatoon. And it was quite a shock for most of us because we were, that was our community, and that was where we all lived, and with our, our Kokums and mushrooms and aunties and uncles and the old people, and we raised on my cousins, and that's the community we knew, and that's how we were raised. And then when the time came that we had to move into the city, it was quite a shock to us because we called it the city because where I lived on Taylor Street, they moved us in off to 3rd Street, which is off East Lake, and still that was seemed to us was a big joke for us to adapt to living in this. And that's where our family had to find places to live and where they stayed. And it was sad because when that happened, our families kind of never had that closeness. As you know, Métis family, especially on our Road Lounge, we were always together. We learned from the old people. We were to all our teachings and learning what to do. My cousins, I had 3 cousins that were similar my age, so we were kind of the ones that were the older ones. And we would have to do the things that were told to us to do. My role was to look after the old people and a lot of the young babies that came in and my young cousins. And not only that, but we had to, do work. We used to go out and get water from the slough and haul water in to make sure for washing clothes. And sometimes in the wintertime, we had to bring in the snow and melt that for laundry. And that was our job. And we never ever felt that it was hard work. It just came natural to us because that's the teachings we had. Everybody had work to do. Where Bowman Collegiate is, that was our community garden. And at that time, everybody would plant our vegetables and potatoes, and we all harvested. Everybody took turns in cleaning it and looking after it. And in the fall, we'd harvest that. And my dad used to haul manure and salt to the Chinese garden and on where Herman Avenue and Ruth Street is. And they had taught us how to make, we had lived in little shacks, so we dug little basements, I guess you'd call them, little holes in there, and then we put sand. We told us to put sand and put our vegetables and everything in there, and they would stay safe, and they did. So we had that teachings as well from them as well, because we worked to them. My father worked many years for them, and we had our own team of horses. I had my own team of horses who was Pat and Bill. I'm always proud of my horses because I used to be able to drive my team of horse and help my dad because I was the second oldest. My sister was the oldest, and she wasn't. I was more or less like, I guess call it now, I know as a tomboy, but my work was to work out there, and I enjoyed working with the horses and my dad and them. And my brother was the youngest, and he was too young. So my dad and I used to do that kind of work. And then in the summer, we would go out and where I'm living now, and where Sutherland, where Wilfred and them were living, that was where we would all pitch our tent and cut the hay for the farmers. My dad didn't go picking stones like the rest of my uncles, but we cut hay for the farmers, stacked the hay, and that's kind of work we done in order to survive. My mother worked, used to go and do house cleaning for people. They lived all on the Saskatchewan Crescent, and they were lawyers and some were doctors, and she would do that cleaning. And I remember my mother so many times when she would come home and she'd look so tired, but she never ever gave up, and because she felt the importance for us. And she had a little bike, and I remember my mother was the best little bike rider in Saskatoon. I think she could just handle that bike. And you know, it was for us. I didn't find it was hard at the time because you're young and you don't think that way. But when I sit back and I think and I listen and I remember the times that we went through, and we survived that, and where storage is, where the importance is. We used to hunt there a deer, we snare our rabbits, pick up berries. Those were all the places that we used to harvest all our stuff and do things for ourselves. And as the years went by, we continued to do work. After a while, I had to start off my dad because my grandmother wasn't well, and that was my role then to look after my grandmother. So I had to stay and take over that position. And I used to, oh, that's my mother there. I didn't know the first pictures. Did you go back to the first picture, Susan? That's my tent and shack where we lived on down by on Taylor First Street, because it was just off where that's the house and that we lived in. And there was 5 of us that lived in that little house, and there was some of our people stayed in our tents. So that was our mansion, and we enjoyed it. I'll tell you a story about and I always think this is a funny story because I had friends and I didn't realize they followed me home, and I didn't want anybody, because I lived out in the bush, and I had to clean the house for my Kokum, and I hauled all our little stuff outside, our little apples. We used to make orange boxes or apple boxes with a little shade. They were a cupboard, so I used to haul everything out because we had old rough floors, and I used to scrub and clean. And my Kokum was sitting out there, and she had a little chair, and all of a sudden she called, "Hasta Mota." I went outside, and here was my friends. I said, "Oh my God." And that time I used to put old curlers in your hair. And I never forgot that because it was so funny. And then they found out where, but I was proud of where we lived because that's who we were. And it, but when I think back and I wonder what they thought. I mean, they never ever said anything, but it was kind of funny. We joked about a lot of those things later on, but that was a good part of life when you think back. And and then we can go to the next um, slide. If you, that's my Kokum. She used to, when we chop wood and saw the logs for our to heat up our shacks in them in the winter, because we had to do a lot of work in doing that, because we had everybody and most of our cousins and my uncles, and we take turns, and then we stack all that up for winter. And my Kokum was picking up the little chips because she used to think that was good to start the fire, and she didn't know my auntie had one of those old box cameras, and I took that picture, and she was so mad at me. I remember her, she was giving me heck because I took this picture. I said, I didn't take it, it'll be okay. But I always kept that picture because I always remember I thought she looked so cute sitting out there trying to get all these little chips. So that was my Kokum, who I looked after till she passed away. I lived with my Kokum and brought her up. She brought me up, and all my children, she she always used to say, "I wish my baby, I'd see all my grandchildren." She lived to see all my kids. We have a picture with her. I'm not sure where it's at now, but she was fortunate. When she passed, she was 75 years of age, and I lived with her and looked after her, and never ever regretted it because she was my mentor and she was my teacher. She taught me my culture, my language, my understanding of what life was about. How I always wondered how she managed. She had um, lots of children. There was 8 that lived, and when she moved into the city from Round Prairie, they lived in Round Prairie, our settlement. And when they moved into Saskatoon, they lived in the first little house. It's still here, 1510 Broadway. Um, that time they used to have what you call, they were like agents. They would come around because they were giving them um, you'd get a token for to buy get your food, and if somebody came in and had them, they would cut you off. So that really bothered most of our people. So that's when we took up our homes on the road lounge. They moved all to the road lounge, and they never put up with that stuff. So that's how we became the road lounge people here in Saskatoon. So that's what I wrote Allowance there, as you can see. And then you can give me. And this is me, the short one, and my sister is no longer with me. There was some kind of an old shed that they had taken. I remember that old place. It was where we lived, and that was on our road Allowance as well. That was the only picture I think that I have when we were younger. So I thought we'd share that. And us kids, there's my sister, my brother, and me, and that was on First Street out in the prairie, and you could see how nice hairdo we had. And you know, I was quite small, and my brother was the baby, so I more or less took on the role to do the work with my the old people and my aunties and my uncles, and I lived with them. And my sister more or less stayed at home, and so did my brother. So I was the one that really had that good teachings and were able to do all kinds of things with our families. And it was so funny because when we were that age, they used to hook up our wagons on a Sunday, and they'd make a great big lunch, and they'd all get together. And as you can see, we live in the bush in the prairie there. But that was our picnic day, so we would go further back. We'd go by past Moosewood Reserve, was called in Whitecap, and we'd go and picnic out there. And it never dawned on us because that was the way, because all our cousins got together, we played baseball, and we played, we had horseshoes, we had the bags, or gunny bags to hop in there. So we had all kinds of activities. But sometimes when we got older, we talked about it. We thought, wow, we're in the bush, and they took us further out in the bush. But that was a way of them, I guess, getting away from all the stuff that was on our road Allowance and feeling to get away from all that. And that's the way I thought about it when we talked about it. So that's the life that I lived on that part. And so the next one is this is my family. My mother's on where I'm sitting, it's on the right hand side, and that's my Kokum and my auntie. She was the oldest. And those were my uncles, the oldest, when standing behind my mother, who were the ones raised my other uncles and aunties when they moved in from Ron Prairie, because my uncle my grandpa left and went and lived with another woman on the other side of town in the west side Métis area, but he had done that. So they couldn't go to school. Those two never got schooling, just the other ones got to schooling. And my mother never knew how to read or write, but she learned how to sign her name, and so did my uncle before they passed. My Kokum had very broken English. She was, if we went in where there were people, she would talk to me and I'd have to translate for her because she felt that people would laugh at her. And so it took a long time, but we got her to be able to come when we would go out and tell her, you can talk. All the other old people are talking and you can talk. So my grandmother kind of we got her to not feel that she'd be ashamed, so she could speak. So that is my family. That is where I lived. I've never had any regrets. We talk about it, our cousins sometime, and the older cousins, and we always said we never knew what it was like. I never knew what it was like to be a teenager. I got married very young, raised all my children, and just continued on. That was my role. I looked after all the old people, and most of them till they passed on. I didn't start getting involved into any of this till 1969 when I started getting involved. And I'm honored to be here saying I'm on the Zoom. I'm here to speak to you people because I was a very shy person, believe it or not. People say we don't believe it, but it's true. I wouldn't go into a restaurant. I wouldn't eat in front of people because I was scared. I was ashamed that they would. I couldn't eat in front of them. I was scared. So I never went unless I went with somebody, and then when I got married, unless my husband comes shopping with me, I went shopping with him. Um, so, that was my life. And then later on, I went to day school, which is called St. Joseph's School at that time. I didn't have much of a schooling. I quit at an early age because of the abuse we went through there. And then that's when I stayed home and ended up getting married and having children. And, when I think back of the times that in my life, and then when we started our local, it was November the 3rd, 1970. My uncle was there, and of course, most of the family. So I felt comfortable. I was there, and I remember the first time that Jimmy Sinclair and Jim DeRosier has asked me to come to go to work for them, and I couldn't even look at them. I put my head down. I was so shy, and then I thought, well, I couldn't do this. How can I do this? I got no education. So I told him I would have to talk to my family, my husband and my children, because that was important to me. Communications amongst our family was the most important thing, and that's the thing I learned. So I went home and I talked to my children. They were all going to school then. My youngest was 7 years of age. They were excited for me, and my husband now was deceased, supported me. I had good support. So I ventured off, and I met many, many good people. I met some good elders, Josephine Palman, Mrs. Lavallee, Miss Doucette. They were the great, great mentors for me. They taught me my ways. They helped me where I am today, how to speak in front of people. So many, many times I have to give credit to these people because these were my teachers. These were my mentors. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would be today. And not now. I've learned so many things from young people. I'm so honored and proud to be part of our local with our young people there, and the things that I learned and teach. I am honored. I ran for city council in 1973. I never thought I'd ever do that, but I just felt the importance because of our women, when our women got involved, and our rights of our women. So I learned a lot from a lot of people. So I'm still learning. I'm 83 years of age, and I'm still learning. And I have a lot of good young mentors, and so I thank them. So that's my story.